An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight? If someone could just quickly give me a shout out in the comments to let me know that I'm on and you can hear me, that would be great. I'm just going to talk really about Batman tonight, quite honestly, and what makes the character great and what is the essence of that character. All right, Vaz, thank you very much. Let's see who's here first. John Henry is here. How you doing, John? Warren is here. Michael is here. Vaz is here. Rex is here. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Yes, putting that in the comments. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. Final Fantasy is here. George is here. Zach Dan. How you doing, Zach Dan? You must have got yourself over from John's Long Box already. Alessandro is here. Let's see who else we got. I think that's everybody. Greg is here as well. So let me reduce myself here. And honestly, what I wanted to talk today about was what makes Batman a great character. I want to actually do this for a lot of different characters if I can, but I'm going to try to do a little bit different than I usually do. My normal Make Comics Great Again stream, which is I talk for 20 minutes and then I go through the comments to see if anybody has any questions. Today, I think I'm just going to ramble on a little bit and keep an eye on the comments and ask you guys the question, what is your favorite iteration of Batman and what makes the character actually work in your opinion? And I think it's something I tried to do a long time ago in one of my videos. And the thought just occurred to me. I don't know if Sound Engraver is going to be in the comments at any point tonight, but Professor Geek put out a video just yesterday or something like that, a couple of days ago, maybe, talking about Batman and the essence of the character and how it translates from one medium to another. It was just a short video, but it made me think about this. You know, what is the essence of this character? So that's exactly what I wanted to look at today. And I'm going to actually, let's see, pull up, share my screen here. I do have Mike's Amazing World of Comics up again. And so let's make this a little bigger so everybody can see it. Full screen. So honestly, we'll go to what I think of as default for Batman. Okay, we're going back to number 1 here. But this is even Detective Comics. I have that open as well, but I'm not going to move to it right now. But I'll go to the Batman because we got spectacular Batman comics here. Just look at, let's see. I think this is right about where Neil, or what is it? Let's see. I just wanted to look at who was doing the cover art for these issues right here. Let's see. Penciler is Irving Novak, but it doesn't say who, if he's doing the covers or not. I think he is at the same time. But anyways, you got beautiful stuff like this. A lot of people go back to these books, and this is where the origin of their idea of what Batman is comes from. But quite honestly, my recollection of Batman and where Batman actually becomes a character in my mind and stays that way forever in my mind is Jim Aparo. So I'm going to see if I can find some Jim Aparo Batman stuff here just really quickly and move on from there. No, I think I already went past the Jim Aparo stuff. I might have to go to Detective Comics because he was more in Detective Comics than Batman at the time. Although there might be some Jim Aparo right here. Let's see. Let's see. Editor is Paul Levitz. Jim Aparo. There you go. You got some beautiful stuff. This is really my version of what Batman is Jim Aparo's Batman. But what I find about the character myself is since it's coming off of those older 60s books for Batman, and then moving into the Jim Aparo world where he is usually the standard for Batman at that time. He's the detective because you're coming off I don't know how exactly are you supposed to say it, but Ra's al Ghul is someone who is just introduced in the 60s as really a main villain, and he calls him the detective all the time. And that's how in the early 80s and late 80s too, I guess, for the entire decade, you view Batman is as the detective. And to me, that's why when you look at modern comics with Batman, it just seems like a completely different character to me. Because as I've said a number of times on other videos, you have Batman, which is like super preparedness man, right? He just prepares and he has these contingency plans and he makes them work and all that kind of stuff. To me, that's not Batman. To me, Batman is a detective. But I find the problem with Batman and the stories right now and why they don't do a detective story well is because they've just leaned too much into the whole superhero genre, and it doesn't make any sense having an actual detective working with the same things that we have today that might be a little bit certainly more advanced than what you'd have in the 80s for a detective working, but it still doesn't make any sense to have someone doing actual detective work when there are superheroes running around every which where, and the universe is about to be destroyed every second month or so in DC. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and besides that, you don't have a lot of people who can actually write even slick detective stories on their own, let alone sandwich them into a superhero universe and try to have it make sense. So to me, that's really the death of Batman, when you get these big DC stories that don't actually allow for the character to breathe as a detective. To me, that's the heart of the character. But I'm going to go through some of your guys' comments here and to see what you say about your iteration of Batman that you like the most. Let's see. If we have any Batman statements here. There we go. Final Fantasy says, my favorite iteration of Batman, Kevin Conroy, without question. He's the voice of Batman. Okay. Let's see, scrolling down. Again, you could add, and Batman, the animated series, and all these kinds of things, because they are iterations of Batman that have a lasting impact today. I would say even probably more than the comics that I'm remembering, because of course you have people like, what is it? You have people doing Batman stories that are based upon the Batman animated universe right now and things like that, and they actually make a little bit more sense because it's a cordoned off universe for Batman. Let's see. I'll scroll down a little more and see what we have. Michael says, my dad still remembers going over to his aunt's house to watch Batman in color. I can remember watching the campy Batman movies in the theater. Although they weren't coming out at that time, they were just, older. In the 80s, they would still play old movies, right? And even if they're 60s movies or 70s movies, you get small theaters that were playing these things. So I did watch Batman and stuff like that in the theater as well. And it was usually reruns of the Batman show on Saturday morning. Anyways, but yeah, a lot of people put that character as the campy character in their mind, and that is the iteration that they remember of the character. To me, again, that's a separate character in a separate world. Let's see. Gordon says the blue and gray blue and gray. Where is the blue and gray come in? That's the question, Gordon. I would have to look up. Let's see here. Let me stop this screen. I will remove from the stage this screen, and we'll put up another one for Detective Comics, and we'll see if we can pinpoint a little bit more the timeline of where the switchover from one Batman to the other goes. Let's see, because honestly, I think Detective Comics was probably more influential than the actual Batman comics themselves. All right, so no, this is Shadow of the Bat. My apologies, that's the wrong one. I have a couple of tabs open at the same time. We'll have to remove that. Again, I always say I thank you for your patience because I have Amish levels of what do we say? Technological skill. How's that? Let's see. It's hard to tell which one is which because I have all three of them open at the same time and they just Mike's Amazing World. Okay, here we have Detective Comics, right? And Batman comes in fairly early. I can't even remember what the first issue of Batman was. 33? No, it's 27. Let's see. We'll scroll down, way the heck down to Batman through the 60s and 70s and into the 80s. Let's see. Scrolling down. And we can see a lot of Jim Aparo stuff here, of course. A lot of beautiful Jim Aparo covers. I have a lot of these, and I don't think I bought them off the newsstand. I don't remember where they even came from. Batman was so ubiquitous at that time. But scrolling down, and here we have, I think, well, we got some, let's see, these covers, of course. There was Todd McFarlane, and who else is doing the covers here? I think that's Alan Davis. Yep, Alan Davis, and a couple of others. But we even have Mike Mignola here, I think. Yep. Although Mike Mignola's Batman is a different character altogether, if you ask me. Here's what we were talking about over at John's Longbox right here. This era of Batman and how John and his guest thought that this was actually a fundamental shift in the character, but one that was at the same time true to the character and expanded the character's universe in a way that most people don't give enough credit to. With the darkness that it brought back into the Detective Comics and to Batman itself. With the Mud Pack, we were honestly just talking about the Mud Pack and Anarchy and all these kinds of things. Yeah, I own this entire run of Batman. But again, to me, it was a very different and, I don't know, not entirely welcome version of Batman that I might think of, because I like the Jim Aparo Batman. Let's see. Rex says, I'd say my favorite was the 90s cartoon Batman, the animated series. It was the one I grew up with and my first exposure to characters. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. Yeah, I can understand that too. And quite honestly, here's the funny thing, Rex. I watched the entire series of that when it first came out. Why? I think it was like the second year after it came out or things like that. So I'm very familiar with it, but it was because at the time I was working on a farm, and in the break room where we ate our lunch, it was basically the only thing on. So that's all we watched every lunch break. So we watched the entire thing over and over and over again. So, but it's a valiant attempt to take the character in a different direction. I quite agree, and I can see why some people think of it with fond memories. Let's see. Alessandro says, I like the Batman Brave and Bold series. Okay. Although I think, I'm not entirely sure, Alessandro, what you are referring to, because was there not a Batman Brave and Bold series that is a cartoon as well? If that's what you're referencing, I'm not entirely sure. Scrolling down, we'll see what else we have to talk here about Batman, and I'm already getting behind in the chat. Let's see. John Henry says, Jim Aparo used to be my favorite Batman artist. Again, yeah. The one thing about Jim Aparo that I find is so amazing is the fact that I don't think I can come up with a more literal artist than Jim Aparo. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but he's not exactly an illustrator. He is a cartoonist, if you would put it in those terms, which is Jack Kirby terms or, Will Eisner terms. They say, the people who do comic books should be cartoonists because you got to bring that movement into it. So an illustrator does more stills, and it would be stilted to put stills into a moving medium like comic books. Although certainly the older versions of comics like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers and things like that, the really old ones, those were illustrators. But still, at the same time, Jim Aparo, to me, is the epitome of someone who crosses over both of those worlds, because his books are so his iteration of Batman and the world around him is so realistic that you could almost think of it as he was an illustrator. But at the same time, he has the cartoon feel of being able to insert movement into the entire thing. That's how I view Jim Aparo and why I think that he was such a great Batman artist. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. Let's see, scrolling down. See here. Vaz says, we still watch some of the old Adam West Batman when I go to a friend's place to watch some old movies. Always silly fun. Honestly, I never really, I again, it was something that was on all the time when I was a kid. I never really appreciated it at the time, to be sure. But I tell the story every once in a while, Vaz. I think it was probably about a year or two after I started my channel. So about 4 years ago, maybe 5, when I went back and bought a whole bunch of really old, to me, really old anyways, Batman comics, which would be the Denny O'Neil stuff. And it's early 70s, and I don't know, might be later than early 70s, but it was very much the storylines were things that were silly at the same time as looking at a very literal picture that was much more in tune with realism than what you get in the 60s for Batman. But I laughed my head off. This is 4 years ago when reading them. I did not appreciate these when I was a kid at all. But I was reading again. What is it? Batman was fighting. I think it was. I can't remember if it was the Riddler. It was the Riddler, and again, the Riddler was stealing all the zoo animals, and Batman was using the giraffe's neck to swing around and then kick Riddler again. And I just had to burst out laughing. It was so absurd. But yeah, again, the weird thing about Batman and why I chose Batman to do tonight about the essence of this character is because I want to go over the essence of a lot of different characters. But Batman is just so out there to try to nail down exactly what the character is, because there's been so many different iterations of him, and the Batman Adam West stuff is one of those iterations that is completely foreign to, let's say, any Batman that you're going to get today, or any Batman you would get in the 80s, 90s, anything like that. So trying to coalesce everything down into what are the essential parts of Batman is a Herculean task if it can be done at all. So yeah, I agree. Watching older stuff like that, I appreciate it now that I'm older. Let's see. Scrolling down. John Henry says, super preparedness man, Bat God is lame. Yeah. I was reading, I think I did a review. I don't know if I did a review of the entire book or not, but there was a Batman, I think it was probably Detective Comics that came out about 2000, maybe 2001, and I did it on my channel, and I went over some parts of it. And you had Batman, and he basically had detective like qualities to him, but he was using, I think, a spectrometer that could see ghosts. And I was like, okay, no, I'm sorry, but it's just it breaks the character when you're trying to say he's a detective, but at the same time he has access to paranormal and alien technology. It doesn't work. Let's see. Scrolling down. Zachtan says the world's greatest detective. Love Batman as a detective, but not sure if he really deserves that title. Well, let me see if I can move this down again. We'll put some of these beautiful covers up in the background, and I might switch out a few things. Oh, I love this cover. This is iconic cover right here. I can't remember who did Mike Wagner. But I see what you're talking about not sure if he's the world's greatest detective, but I will add my little 2 cents to that, Zach Dan, in the fact that if you go back to late 60s, early 70s Batman, you had an attempt to try to make him so by introducing elements into the story at that time, which were very unique. Things like the fact that there was a crossover with Sherlock Holmes, quite honestly. And it was almost a passing of the torch from Sherlock Holmes to Batman. It was an attempt within the storyline, even though it was never referenced again, but within the minds of the comic readers at the time to switch the character over into that mode of detective. And it was the time when, well, it's not even the 60s and the 70s. You could go back to the very early Batman comics. Like we'll go back to like, let's see, we go back to the really early stuff for Detective Comics. The fun thing is about Detective Comics, we go back to, almost the beginning and the really hardcore, dark Batman, stuff like this, right? The thing is that in these comics too, what they would do, since it's Detective Comics, is that within the story itself, you would get obviously pages of advertisements, but some of those pages were break pages within the books themselves, wherein they would explain how detectives worked. They would explain things like, what fingerprints were and how you would be able to use them, or they would even have legal stuff in there. What is a habeas corpus? And all these kinds of things. And so it would help augment the fact that this is a story about a detective and he's within that world. So again, yeah, this goes way the heck back right to the very first of Batman and of course, Detective Comics. Let's see. But yeah, I can see how the different iterations of Batman, certainly over the last 30 years, have sort of killed the idea of Batman as the detective. Let's see. Rex says, RJ, I think Professor Geek said it best, where a lot of people want to make Batman into the Punisher with a demonic aesthetic. That's actually a good way to put it. I don't remember Professor Geek saying that. Was it in that video or not? Again, I think that that's exactly the wrong direction to go with Batman. He's not the Punisher. Even though if we're looking at some of these books in the background right now for the old Detective Comics, he did kill people. He didn't have that core element to him that Batman didn't kill way the heck back then. He machine gunned people down. But anyway, I still don't think that he's the Punisher type character, nor that it's a good idea to go in a direction with that character in the Punisher vein, because again, the reason why people did take the character and try to turn him into Punisher was because in the 90s, Punisher was everywhere. There were so many Punisher books. I never truly liked the character of Punisher, but I was collecting everything and I collected so many Punisher books. So many books. They were just everywhere. He was as big as Wolverine. And so the big three probably for Marvel at the time would be Wolverine, Punisher, and Ghost Rider. I know people have almost completely forgotten Ghost Rider by now, but Punisher is still a character that resonates, and you got television shows and everything else still coming out about Punisher. So it was an attempt to revitalize the character by making him into the Punisher because the Punisher was so big. But again, you can't outdo Frank Castle as the Punisher, and to try to make Bruce Wayne into Frank Castle, again, fundamentally changes the character to a point where I don't think the core elements of that character are allowed to breathe, and it becomes something else entirely. And that's possibly why, anyways, you see so many Elseworld stories with Batman right now, because nobody can really figure out what the essence of this character is. And so they try to reshape it into different modes to try to figure out something that will work. Because, Batman was bigger than Superman at points in time. We're talking selling millions of copies almost every month. Certainly if you include all the different Batman titles at the same time. So let's see, scrolling down. George says the closest time they had Batman being a detective was Michael Keaton's version when he figured out how Joker was poisoning Gotham. Well, I would say certainly in the movies, yes. Let's see. John Henry says world's greatest detective who is ostensibly, plausibly relative. Relatively human to a fantastical DC universe like early Batman and pre-90s Batman. Yeah, that's again the problem. It's a problem that the 80s comics dealt with much better than anything else because, especially for DC, even though DC wasn't selling anywhere near as well as Marvel at the time, the DC comics and the Marvel comics to some extent, every superhero team or superhero really lived in their own universe. They didn't connect with the other characters very much. And that's why the idea of joining all the characters together in a crossover was such a big thing, especially in the late 80s, early 90s, because the characters lived in their own little universe. And Batman lived in his own little universe. And the editorial, even at some points in time, would cordon themselves off so that you can't use my character. This editorial is only for this character, and you see that throughout DC and Marvel's history. But the point again is that in doing so, they were able to allow the detective quality of Batman to breathe without in the back of your mind thinking, okay, but aliens are invading in Superman, so what does this matter? You know what I mean? Okay, let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. George says every other version, it's just good guy stops bad guy in action fight. Okay. Let's see. I think you're referring to, so George's talking about the Michael Keaton Batman, and that's when he says every other version is just a good guy stops bad guy in action fight. Let's see. That again, it doesn't cover the entire comic genre. I would say it would cover the movies and the television shows. Let's see. Alessandro says, RJ, speaking of Batman, what do you think of the fact that it was born as a plagiarism of a pulp character, The Shadow? Again, I don't think it was plagiarism. It was an homage, quite honestly, because The Shadow, most people don't realize right now how big The Shadow was, especially back in the time when Batman was invented. The Shadow, I think the world record for an author that has written the most books ever is a guy who, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, who wrote Shadow books. That's how many Shadow books are out there. He has the world record for writing the number of books written. And what did he write? He wrote Shadow novels. So that's just the novels. And besides that, you had comic strips. Besides that, you had radio plays. The Shadow was everywhere. And this character this character was so large that, again, other people, other companies wanted to try to get in on how big the Shadow was and build their own character based upon the same kind of aesthetic, the same kind of it's not even powered individual, because again, that's why Batman doesn't have powers, because he is a copy of the Shadow. And even though the Shadow does have some small powers, but Batman has nothing. And that's why, again, another reason why I would say you put him in Detective Comics and you make him more of a detective than even the Shadow. But I don't see any problem with it at all. I honestly think of it, canon, let's say canon in my head, right? The canon in my head would be a line of detectives. And this goes back to that story I was talking about with Batman and Sherlock Holmes. I think if you want to read it, it's probably up on Internet Archives. If I don't know, last time I went to Internet Archives, I did see it, but they're in some dire straits right now because people taking down stuff all the time. But anyways, yeah, I just think of Batman as a detective in a line of other detectives like Sherlock Holmes. And to me, my headcanon is you would get different detectives all over the world and they would pass on their knowledge from one to another. It's kind of like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. We have different characters, pulp characters and novel characters and things like that coming together within their own world, and they join themselves together. That's how I would think of the detectives over time, and Batman would just be in the line of those things. But yeah, I don't see the fact that he is a copy of the Shadow as anything but an homage to that character. And I love the Shadow. So I love the elements of Batman that are in the Shadow. That's why for my character, which is Kit Fox, he is basically a play off of uh, 80s and 90s Batman with Jim Aparo Batman. And to me, it's like he's another one in this line of succession of detectives. And that's part of why we have the character. I built that character the way that it is, not only because Renzo wanted to my artist Renzo Rodriguez wanted to continue on with this character and redeem this character, but I wanted to redeem the character in a way that he comes back to his roots of being a detective. Let's see. And by the way, just a quick insert here. If anybody ordered either the Valiant Heroes or just the Kit Fox comic from me, because almost all of those have gone out. There's only a handful that still have to be shipped out to people and reshipped if they were lost and books like that. But you see that it's a redemption of Kit Fox story that's in there. It's a redemption of Kit Fox #1, and it's chapter 1 basically. And you want to continue on with that character, it's going to continue on in Thomas Valiant #2. There's a bit of a resolution for the character there, but it's almost a cliffhanger at the same time as being a resolution. So yeah, it is to get that character back into a more detective mode. Let's see, scrolling down. Let's see. Nunia, how you doing? He says he also detected who Oswald Cobblepot really was. All right. Let's see. Gordon also says my Batman is the Jim Aparo, Neil Adams, Alan Davis Batman. Again, to me, Neil Adams himself as an artist overshadowed the character even of Batman when he drew that character. I think that Neil Adams did that so many times as an artist. He overshadowed the character with his art, whereas Jim Aparo was subtle enough to give you the character and allow the character to be the star. I don't know, but I do love Neil Adams' art for Batman. I should put some of that up in the background. Give me 2 seconds here. I have some of it somewhere. It might not be all entire Batman stuff, but there's some Batman mixed within it. Let's see. I have it somewhere. Give me a second. It might be the Neil Adams one. Let's see. Some Dead Man there with Neil Adams, but I'm sure I have a Batman one here somewhere. Oh, there it is. I'll let this Neil Adams play through, and then I'll go to the Batman one in a minute. Go back to my comments. Let's see. Now I got to find out where I went because my comments always skip a beat when I go over to the other screen to try to put the stuff on in the background. Scrolling down. Salty, how you doing? Salty says, honestly, the 70s ABC Saturday morning cartoon Super Friends led me to comics. I had never thought of that. That again, you have a version of Batman in that as well. I don't remember exactly much about the version of Batman from Super Friends. I remember much more Superman, a little bit of Wonder Woman. Honestly, remember Aquaman more from that than I would Batman, and of course the Wonder Twins and things like that. But yeah, again, another iteration of the character. Let's see. Scrolling down. Quite honestly, let me ask this question. Okay, this is an aside here to my Batman rant, but Salty and anybody else that watched those Super Friends cartoons on whatever Saturday morning when it was on. To me, in my head, to this day, whenever I hear Darkseid speak, he speaks in the voice from Super Friends. Quite honestly, he has a gravelly voice. I don't know who got to do it at the time, but it was to me, it is quintessential character and definition of the character of Apocalypse, and especially how he speaks. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Let's see. Scrolling down, scrolling down. Final Fantasy says, I think the best way to take is maybe to have him as a tactician for the Justice League. That's actually, well, that's not a bad idea. I do believe that he is more or less that character now for the Justice League, or at the very least a couple of years ago for the Justice League. Right now, I'm not entirely sure, but that would make a lot more sense. And when you got into not Justice League of America, but the revamping as Justice League America, that's kind of what he was. Besides punching Guy Gardner in the face. Let's see, scrolling down, scrolling down. George says they should get a good Sherlock Holmes writer or a guy who wrote the movie January Man to write Batman comics for him to be a good detective. I agree. No, that's completely right, George. Yep, I 100% agree. If they actually want to stop putting out these Elseworld comics for Batman, because I know he's probably the only thing that is making DC any kind of money right now. He's holding the entire company up. It's Batman. Really. We just got to admit that. But that's why they have to put out all these different Batman titles and try to sell as much as possible, because everybody that collects Batman wants to keep all Batman and just buys all the Batman, and they're just milking the whales basically. But if they wanted to revamp the character and make it into a character that was going to stand the test of time and still at the same time be the tentpole for DC Comics, that, George, is exactly what they should do, quite honestly. Because think about it, honestly. And here's something that they could do very easily with Batman, in my opinion. They always talking about, we want to get more women into comics, and that's the idiotic idea of what the people at comics right now, they're trying to turn it into a female brand. But the amount of people who listen to or watch or read true crime right now is just off the charts. And women who read true crime, they read it more than men. So why not take true crime and a detective story and someone who can actually write those kinds of stories and turn it into what Batman is and sell those books? You could sell those books to guys and to girls at the same time, because if you made it that kind of true drama, true crime drama, it would be something that people would love. You're spot on, George. Let's see, scrolling down. Jay the Beast is here. He says, Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. The version of Batman that sticks out for me is Arkham. I can never say it right. Arkhamverse. I love, I love TAS, but the feeling I get watching the opening cutscene in Arkham Asylum is what I expect from Batman. Okay. All right, there we go. Another iteration of the character as well. Let's see. Vaz says local comic shops gave some free copies of current day Batman. I tried some. I regret doing so. Yeah. Sometimes you might just regret walking into the comic shop. Let's see. Greg says, Batman version for me is the goofy criminals, and he has to outwit them. Yeah, Greg, that's exactly what I was talking about a few minutes ago with, I don't know what I could probably grab it. It's in a box around or somewhere, but the Batman comics that I bought a couple of years ago, which were probably from the late 60s. That's exactly what it is. Goofy criminals, and he outwits them, where he's actually trying to, I don't know, again, it's probably Denny O'Neil that was writing the character at that time, or was dealing with the character at that time. But that's exactly, to my mind, what you're describing right there. And it was Batman, but at the same time funny, but not campy funny to the extent of the Adam West stuff. Let's see. Scrolling down. Alessandro says, RJ, I've noticed that the progressives often talk about good and evil with disdain, calling it just an us versus them mentality. Ironically, this is in fact their mentality if you look at their actions. Yeah, I agree. Exactly. They have no they're basically nihilistic, so they have no idea of what actual good and evil is. That's why they don't mind writing and saying that they like to write villains more than heroes, because again, there's no such thing as good and evil in their minds. Let's see. Scrolling down, Zektan says, "I like how Batman is a balance of competing facets: weirdness and seriousness, harsh and kind, peak human and only human." Well, again, that you just hit on something else right there, Zektan. It's the malleability of the character. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at here as well. I think there is an essence to the character, which if you don't have it, it's not that character. It's not Batman. It's something else. But at the same time, he is a very malleable character. When they took Batman and took him and put him into the Swamp Thing books, again, is that late 60s, early 70s? I'm not entirely sure. But the character took on a completely different look, and the weirdness that came out of that is something that has impacted the visuals of Batman even to this day. But it wasn't something that broke the character. It was something that allowed the character to exist in a very different way. And again, it was because the writers of that book at the time, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, for shame for me, but he said, okay, if you're going to allow me to put Batman in my book, I'm going to write Batman as I would have him exist in the Swamp Thing world, not as you have him existing in Detective Comics. He literally said that to the editors at DC at the time, and they said, go to town, which again is something I would see as impacting the character up until this day. Let's see. Tony is here. How you doing? Happy Thanksgiving to you, Tony, as well. Let's see. Scrolling down. Honduran is here. I'm not entirely sure what 27 means, Honduran, but 27, back to you. Scrolling down. Let's see. John Henry says, any of you read the Batman Adventures? It's based on Batman show, and it's really good. It doesn't seem like a step down knockoff. Paula Dini, let's see, Ty Templeton. Isn't that where, again, the first appearance of Harley Quinn is for comics anyways? I think that one's probably, I don't know how much that's worth, but it's worth a fairly hefty chunk of cash right now. Let's see. I still have Neil Adams up in the background. I'm waiting for that to cycle through to go to the Batman one. But yeah, I think that is an extension of the animated series universe, and a good extension of it, to say the least, since it did introduce other characters. Let's see. Oh, there. We have cycled through. Let me go to the Batman stuff, which has some Neil Adams in it as well. But I think this is iconic pictures of Batman I got off of a website, which, again, not me saying they're iconic. It's a website saying they're iconic. Let's see now. Where the heck did I go? Here we are. I'm back to 27. Scrolling down back to where we were. Pedro is here. Pedro says black and very dark tone of blue and gray. Well, that's what you have right here, I think. Let's see. Scrolling down. Gordon brings up a interesting point. Mike Mignola's Batman is Fat Man. Honestly, I can't remember. I think it was Cosmic Odyssey. I really loved, because it was Mike Mignola that did Cosmic Odyssey, if I remember. And yes, he does portray all the characters as fat. Basically, they're very much wider than they would be in any other book. But I really liked the version of Batman in those books, in the Cosmic Odyssey itself, even though it was a very short, term that he had playing with that character in that series. But again, if I remember correctly, it was because parademons had got trapped on the earth because the boombox opened a portal, and Darkseid tried to invade Earth at one point, and then as they retreated, this parademon got stuck on Earth, and he ended up staying in Gotham City and then going into the sewers and basically becoming a serial killer because he was hunting people and using them, I think, for food. I'm not entirely sure. And Batman had to use his detective skills to find out what was going on. To me, the visuals of Mike Mignola really worked with that type of story. And again, I really love that iteration of the character in that miniseries, which again is another one I hadn't even thought of before I did tonight's or set up tonight's idea in my head of what I was going to do. Thank you very much, Gordon, for bringing that up. Let's see. John Henry says, I thought Jerry Conway's Batman was the greatest Batman run, even better than his Spider-Man, but the Batman Adventures is amazing. Okay. Good to know that there are, again, so many different this is kind of why I wanted to do this stream at the same time as just because I wanted to talk about Batman, but to get your guys' ideas about what the best version of Batman is, because there's just so many of them out there, and you guys are coming up with things I would not even have thought about. Scrolling down. Final Fantasy says, if you think about it, Batman's strength lies not only in his body, but also in his mind, his unwavering sense of justice, and his compassion. Thanks to his father. Okay. Well, I agree. Here's one of the things about, I think, the Jim Aparo, we'll say, run on Batman that I didn't quite like. And it's this very 60s idea. It was the fact that you take on to Batman all of this Eastern mysticism. And again, Neil Adams did that as well. To me, that didn't need to be there in the character in the 80s versions. Let's say, for example, in the 80s versions of the comics of Batman, he only slept like 3 hours a day, and that's all he needed. Why? Because he had learned some Far Eastern meditation, which would allow him to do that, and that would heal his body and give him the amount of rest that he would need to both be Batman during the night and to be Bruce Wayne during the day. I don't know. To me, it just entered a element into the character that never really sat well with me, quite honestly. But at the same time, it allowed him to be exactly what you're describing here, Final Fantasy. It was the fact that he had basically the peak version of a human body. And again, I don't know if that's the character of Batman. To me, as we were just talking about a couple of minutes ago, one of the fundamental things about Batman is he is a more human version of the Shadow than the Shadow himself. And his humanity and his limitations is a part of that humanity that should be kept in, if you ask me. So to have him use these, let's say, almost mystical meditative techniques from the Far East and all these kind of things, it takes him out of the idea of being a truly human character, even if he's just the peak of human form. Now, it still brings him out of, this is a human being and nothing but a human being in a world of gods that are coming down with, not only superheroes, but supervillains as well. So yeah, I think that the balance, as you say here, Final Fantasy, is that you balance his body and his mind, and that's what makes him much more the character that he should be, because of course, to be truly human and to survive, he needs to do exactly that. He needs to extend, at the very least, well, we'll put it in RJ terms. He needs to extend the virtue of his mind and his body at the same time, and to be in the virtue of both of those things without turning it into something superhuman or semi-superhuman. And to put it in layman's terms, exactly what you're saying, Final Fantasy. It's his body and his mind at the same time. Let's see. Here is Sound Engraver. We were talking about you. Were your ears burning, Sound Engraver? I was talking about you at the first of the stream. Reading Dark Victory now by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sales. So the reason why, just in case you're wondering, Sound Engraver, why I was talking about you was because I was inspired by Professor Geek and his, I think, latest video to talk about Batman tonight. Let's see, scrolling down. Ryan, how you doing, Ryan? Ryan says, RJ, I believe that what makes a character iconic is how they live out their morals, philosophy, and worldview across many different difficult scenarios. Batman, Spider-Man, Superman are best examples. Completely. I was not going to even go in that direction, Ryan, but you're completely right. I agree again 100% with that statement. That's exactly what I would nail down as being the moral compass of a character, not only defining what the character is, but what the character can do. So you just summed it up. Thank you very much, Ryan. And again, this is why I do these. This is in part, anyways, why I do these streams. Because to talk to you guys and to get your perspective on this thing, you guys much smarter than I am. When you come together and talk about these characters, thank you very much, Ryan. This is exactly what I need to think about when I create a character and what I need to do to make a good character. And this is part of the reason why I want to talk about these things, because these are iconic characters. I want to build something that someday might be an iconic character. And why not start at square one? And exactly, take his moral philosophy and worldview and just make that as it should be, the kernel of truth within the character that defines his body and mind. Let's see, scrolling down. George says, he's a so-so Batman, but Ben Affleck did say one thing right when he was asked what his powers were, and his answer was, I'm rich. Would that be for Ben Affleck or for Bruce Wayne? Because it would fit both of those. Let's see, scrolling down. John Henry says, yes, that makes sense. I like Jim Aparo as a literal Batman. That's how I perceive how Batman actually is. But I liked Norm. I don't even know. You like someone else's style. I can never pronounce names. I am the worst because I learned to read phonetically. So yeah, I just screw people's names up completely. Let's see, scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down, see if we have anything else. Vaz says, I remember liking the old comic book Batman Year One, which was cool back then. I can't remember where Year One was published. Let's go back to Detective Comics. Let's see, scrolling down. Was it published in Batman or was it published in Detective Comics? I think it was published in Batman. Let's see. Was a series within a series, was it not? If I remember correctly. Yeah, I think it was in Batman. Just scrolling through all of these beautiful covers for Batman. Yeah, I might take a look through the other Batman character covers in a little bit. But yeah, Batman Year One was exceptional. But again, it was a series within a series. I don't know how much, to my liking, it would actually impact the rest of the series and the character around it. Scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down. Manny, how you doing, Manny? Manny says, just wondering, has anybody seen the show Gotham? What is Bruce like in that show? I don't. I honestly, I remember the show coming out. I don't remember watching the show. But again, different iteration of the character. Again, there are just so many of them. Scrolling down. John Henry says, I need to read that Riddler comic. Scrolling down. Rex says, RJ, it's not exactly Batman, but from what I've heard, when it comes to getting the Joker right, the best versions are both scary and funny. Yeah, that's why, to me, making him such a psychopath in the in the early 2000s, where he like tore off his face, that's not, again, that's not where you go with that character. And I don't like that version of the Joker at all. He's scary, but at the same time funny, because you tear off your face. I think you've abandoned funny at that point. Scrolling down. Let's see. Incubus, how you doing here? We have Incubus Time Lord. He says, who would you consider to be Batman's most underrated villain? My pick would be Night Slayer. He was one of the few arch enemies who could fight Batman to a draw other than the Reaper and the KG Beast. Honestly, I was going to say KG Beast. That's probably, although I don't know, KG Beast is more, I think that what they tried to do with KG Beast was to make a version of Craven's Last Hunt for Batman. And that's why they came up with KG Beast. He is almost a Craven like character. And maybe it's just me in my mind, and because of the Mike Zeck connection with the covers for both of those little, again, series within a series, little story arcs. But at the same time, to answer your question, that's the character that comes to my mind. That being said, I'm sure that if I thought about it, I would come up with a better version of the character. There are, I don't know. To me, again, when I created my character, which is Kid Fox, which is a play off of the basically Jim Aparo Batman, what did I come up with? I came up with a version of trying to join together the Penguin and the Clock King. Because honestly, I think Clock King might be up there as one of the underrated villains for Batman. So that's where the idea of Ostrich, my character in Thomas Valiant #1, came from. He's basically a combination of Penguin and the Clock King, and he's a reformed villain which tries to become a hero. So yeah, I guess Clock King would probably be my answer to that. Scrolling down. Honduran says world's greatest detective is Detective Chimp. Okay. I have to laugh. It's so weird. I just tried to explain this to someone. I think it was like a week or two ago, about how if you want to sell comics, and it was something that goes way the heck back into the 70s. But if you wanted to this day, if you want to sell comics or get a bump, but certainly nowhere near as much as it happened in the 60s, but just put a gorilla or a chimpanzee on the cover of your comic. That was it. That's why I have so many of these characters that are gorilla-based characters or chimpanzee-based characters. And again, if you go back to, I don't know, all of the different ideas that came out with in the 70s, and again, it might be late 60s as well, like I don't know, BJ and the Bear and all these kinds of weird movies and television shows and things like that. I don't know what exactly, to me, I don't remember fully anyways why it was so much that way, but I think Detective Chimp was part of that entire thing. Let's see, scrolling down. Rex says, RJ, I've heard the argument that Batman has to be super preparedness man and a god man and a god mode Mary Sue, so it can make sense for him to stand alongside the other heroes given their superpowers. I don't think so. I've heard that argument as well, but I don't ascribe to that. And one of them, I would say the Marvel, or a close Marvel version of Batman in that regard, and I did a video about this probably around the first of my channel, was to break down the character of Hawkeye. Because Hawkeye, he has basically, I mean, no superpowers at all, right? And basically very few tricks up his sleeve that could look like powers. But yet he stands on a battlefield with gods and he survives. And part of it, again, is, as we were just talking about, his mentality and his brashness even. It's certainly a different character than Batman, but he's able to do that, and they're able to pull it off with that character, and have been able to pull it off with that character. I'm not entirely sure now, because again, they've broken the character with the whole, what's her name, Kate Bishop. But the Clint Barton character they nerfed, but still, you go back to 60s, I don't know, at the very least 70s and 80s, and you go back to those and 90s versions of Hawkeye, and you can see that you can do that. You can put a non-powered character on this battlefield with these godlike beings and still have it make sense. So I think that they could do something similar with Batman, certainly, without making him a god mode Mary Sue. Let's see. Alessandro says, RJ, I have to admit, I don't mind Batman, but I personally prefer Superman. You're in the minority, Alessandro. It was once that way. Most people love Superman more than Batman, and I don't know when the switch came over. Probably in the late 60s, early 70s again. But to me, I resonate more with the character of Superman, but I would probably have an easier time writing a Batman story than a Superman story. I would love to write both, because I would lean into the idea for a Superman story that Jim Shooter talks about every once in a while, which is Superman is Sir Lancelot. I would lean into that, and that would be a story I would love to tell. But Batman, I love detective stories. Um, Quite honestly, how I got into doing the thing that I did for research, which was legal research, and I did it for, I don't know, 20 years or more, and built a company around it and all that, was because I loved detective work. And, I grew up watching, Magnum PI, right? And I want it to be something like that. And the basic thing that I got to do after a while was something kind of like that. It was because I did research for not only law firms and stuff like that, which is where the majority of money came from, but I also did work for detective agencies and reporters and people, say, the Justice Department at times. So they're trying to track people down and things like that, or process servers, things like that. So I have in my mind, and I guess in my experience, the ability to put puzzles together in that way, because that's exactly what research was for all of those different kinds of institutions that I was working for. It was, figure out this puzzle for me because I can't. And even the legal people, even the lawyers and the law firms, and the work that you would do like that, they would say, yeah, I don't have the time to figure out this puzzle. You figure it out for me. And so that's what I did. And that's why I think I could write much better a puzzle like story, if not a detective story, because I do try to write detective like stories within the Kid Fox stories. And to me, stories themselves are a puzzle. But yeah, I would love to write both of those characters, Alessandro, and I can see the vast difference, but between the characters, but the vast, I don't know what you would call it, uh, the amount of material there in order to explore what a true hero is in two completely different directions. I'm sorry, I went off on a rant on that. Let's see, scrolling down. Da, da, da. Let's see, scrolling down. Let's see if we have any more Batman related comments or questions. Oh, Vaz has an interesting comment here. He says, I kind of stopped being interested in Batman during the OMAC storyline. I think it was one of the turning points, turning DC into a nihilist vision. Yeah, I agree. Completely, yes. And that's where, again, you have, if I remember correctly, Wonder Woman killing Max Lord, and things like that. The whole OMAC thing just threw so much together at one point and tried to resolve it through this almost nihilistic, but at the very least nitty gritty to the extreme, if not nihilistic, storyline that just didn't work, if you ask me. Scrolling down. Alessandro says, RJ, what is your opinion on the no kill rule for superheroes? Uh, what is my opinion on it? I don't know if I could actually give my opinion on it as a whole. I would say that you would have to look at the company and how the company would do superheroes and have it make sense in that way. I think DC is much more saddled with the idea of a no kill rule. Marvel is not. But at the same time, there is a streak of that, we'll say, a heavy streak of the no kill rule within DC and a heavy streak of the kill rule within Marvel. For myself and the characters that I write, this is, to me, the let's say the quintessential way of expressing whether or not someone is a villain or not, because in my universe you have these characters who portray themselves. Let me put that Batman back up in the background for one more time. They portray themselves as heroes, but the point is, how do you figure out whether or not they're heroes? You look at their actions, and if they kill, then they're not heroes. That's how it works in my universe. Anyways, let's see, scrolling down. Let's see. John Henry. Oh, bringing up a point of order here that I hadn't even thought about. I think Robin is so fundamental to the Batman characterization and elevated and made him more distinct, defining Bruce as struggling to be like a father, but was still like an older brother. I had never, ever thought of it that way, John Henry. Again, thank you so much for that comment, for all of your comments, honestly, because you're helping me explore this character in a way that I had never done before. But exactly, because how does Batman become a father when he never had a father? Quite honestly, if he, you know, he did have a father up until a point, obviously, and the losing of his father and his mother was so traumatic that he became Batman. But he only has a very limited amount of years that he can remember his father as his father. How in the world does he become a father? And I think you hit the nail on the head here, John Henry. He tries to be a father figure, but ends up being an older brother. So, yeah, it would define that character in a way that we just talked about a few minutes ago with it is a very interesting dynamic between a father and a son, in that if you're a father, you would know that if you want to see what your faults are, become a father, because you're, especially if you have a son, that son is going to be a hyped up extreme version of yourself with no filter, especially when he's starting to grow up. And you will just look at him and see all of your faults magnified, sticking in your face. And that's what it's like to be a father. And to take that and to put it into this character of Batman does fundamentally change how the character exists. You're right, John Henry, because if that's what a character, or if that's what a father figure is, and I truly hold to that, and you take Batman and you give him a son or a character that is like a son, then that dynamic comes out and he can see his faults being portrayed in this other person in front of him that he's trying to raise. And he will change himself, as all good fathers do. He will change himself in order to try to make himself better, because he can see now his faults in front of him in another person. Let's see. Zach Dan says, a lot of superhero episodes come down to a fight, but it is how the fight plays out that helps make it interesting. Fights are mini stories and thus have many ways to manifest. Completely agree, Zach Dan. Completely agree. It all comes down to a fight and how you handle that fight. To me, anyways, going back to the RJ way of thinking about everything, it shows whether or not you are in your virtue, whether you have those virtues that allow you to call yourself a hero. Let's see. Scrolling down. I have been speaking for over an hour now. I will try to get to the bottom of this chat. I knew that talking about Batman would probably take more than an hour, but we'll see if we can skip through a little bit. Hopefully not missing too much here. And let's see, scrolling down. Alessandro says, RJ, I've noticed a pattern in the works of various progressives of the I love science type, where they often demonize two men of science, Edison and Isaac Newton. I understand Edison since he was a capitalist. I don't know about Newton. What do you think? I don't. I have. That's the first I've ever heard. I know that they have the I love science thing, but they don't actually love science. They love the idea of science because basically they love the idea of magic, as far as I'm concerned. And so they don't understand what science actually is, and they turn it into magic. And that's how they write stories. They write science as magic. Now, you might say that that's a thing that you can do within science fiction and fantasy, but not to the extent that they do it, because they have no clue what science is, and because they have no clue what logic is, because everything that a progressive is basing their worldview upon is feelings, and it's subjective, and science is objective. So the two do not come together at all. But as to your question about Newton, I really don't know. Scrolling down. Let's see. Zach Dan says, I'm looking forward to more Valiant heroes, including Kit Fox. Yeah, that's I say. The Thomas Valiant #2 is going to continue on the story of the redemption of Kit Fox within the story itself. So he'll just be a secondary character within that story. Let's see. Scrolling down. Alessandro says, RJ, if I understand correctly, for conservatives, freedom means that they are responsible for your actions, while for liberals, it means that you have no responsibility. I was thinking about this, Alessandro, myself, and I was going to do a video on it, and I never got around to doing so. I honestly think, and I will have to think about it even more before I really, do a video on it. But honestly, think it comes down to a more fundamental idea than that, where in this life you have to serve something, and I think conservatives, if you want to be a true conservative, you at the very least, at the barest minimum, serve something greater than yourself. And if you wish to be a conservative that has actual consistency in their worldview, then you have to be someone who serves the truth. Whereas a liberal is someone who serves themselves. And I know that a lot of my listeners are liberals, but the whole point is, the whole idea of liberalism is to liberate yourself from rules that actually are rules, if you go back to their base, have a basis in reality. And you just can't do that without serving yourself above what is true, which goes back to Aristotle again. And what is it? It goes back to Plato even. I think it's his 5th book of the Laws where he says that exact thing. And this is what he talks about, the difference between a man who serves himself above what is true. And that's the real crux of it, if you ask me. Let's see, scrolling down. Sound Engraver, how you doing? She says, if Batman killed Joker, it would prove Joker right about Batman and therefore prove Bruce Wayne wrong. And that's no different from Joker, but Batman is different and therefore he doesn't kill. There's your no kill rule for Batman right there. Let's see, scrolling down. Let's see, scrolling down. She continues on and says, Batman doesn't need to kill. He only needs to incapacitate. Well, I think Batman would have Batman's connection with the police also would mean that the no-kill rule has, at the very least, some practical applications as well. Let's see. Error 404, how you doing? Says, how villainous can a hero's aesthetic be before it is considered subversively, indulgently edgy? What's a good example of heroes who skirt that line? You'd have to go back to the 90s and look at Marvel's Midnight Suns. That's exactly where you would get probably the definition of what you're looking for. So go back to Midnight Suns, which I think, if I remember correctly, had its own editorial staff for those books at the time. That's where you cross over from so edgy that they're no longer superheroes, if you ask me. You could look at something like the Fantastic Four that was going on at the same time, where you had Sue Richards have that completely hideous costume with the window in the chest, and then become Malice, if you're looking for a more mainstream version of, and smaller, I guess, version of the exact thing. But yeah, Midnight Suns is your answer to that question right there. They decided to go so edgy with those characters that they no longer were superheroes. And you would, let's see, it's Ghost Rider, Blade, I think Daredevil was thrown in there at the same time, and I can't remember who else was in Midnight Suns off the top of my head. Mobius was there, obviously, but who else? And they did, if I remember correctly as well, did things like instead of having the normal page for a comic wherein the background in the gutters would be white, the background in the gutters for most of the Midnight Suns books were all black, things like that. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down to George. He says, come on, RJ. Everyone has hit Guy Gardner in the face. Holy Moses. Am I that far back in the chat that you're talking about Guy Gardner? I got to move ahead a little bit here because it's already an hour and 15 minutes. Let's see. Scrolling down. Zach Dan says, Number 1, Batman wants justice. He struggles with feelings of vengeance, but is determined to fight for justice. 2, Batman is otherwise very pragmatic, but his no-kill rule keeps him disciplined. That is a very good way to put it, Zach Dan. And he has the number 3. Number 3, Batman cares about people and wants as many criminals to reform as possible. Brilliant. Zach Dan, you should write a Batman story. Honestly, you have very much a grasp on the character. That those 3 rules right there. I honestly, if I need inspiration again for my character, for Kit Fox, I'm going to come back and watch this stream, because you guys just are pulling on so many strings to define a Batman-like character that, again, things I've never even thought of before. Let's see. Gordon says, but do true crime fans want to see the detective beat up the suspects? I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. I would have to look more into the genre. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Tony, how you doing, Tony? Tony says, my favorite Batman is the one written by Alan Grant and illustrated by Norm. I can never say his name correctly. Braveforge? I don't know. I'm not entirely sure where that is in the canon of Batman. You'd have to point me towards numbers or a series, because I can't. I'm a visual person, honestly. Sometimes you can give me numbers and things and names like that, and I can connect them, but sometimes it's just a blank unless I have a visual. Let's see. Nator, how you doing? Says, should Agatha Christie have written Batman because she was a successful detective writer? I think not. No, but I think that a successful detective writer is what is needed to write Batman. Not, that's your logical fallacy there. Not every successful detective writer can write Batman, but only a successful detective writer can write Batman in what I would see as the core elements of that character as the detective. Scrolling down. Let's see, scrolling down. There's a whole lot going on here. Crosstalk in the chat, so I'm just trying to parse through it all. Let's see. Final Fantasy says, I talked about this with my friends online. Many of Batman's characteristics are very, very similar to Superman. They both know right from wrong and choose to do the right thing because it is just. I agree. And one of the things, to me, one of the stories for Batman and Superman that always sticks out in my mind was DC Comics Presents, I do believe, in the early 80s, where they revamped the titles so that Batman was meeting Superman for the first time, and Superman was basically forced into doing Batman's bidding, because Batman told him that he had strapped a bomb to a person that Superman would never find, and if Superman didn't do exactly what he said, then he would press the button and that person would die. And that was Batman's way of controlling Superman the first time that he met him, because he didn't know exactly what Superman was going to do or how he would perceive the world, anything like that, because he didn't know anything about him as an individual. And so Batman got Superman to do all of the things necessary in order to capture the villain that Batman couldn't capture himself. And then Superman said, okay, tell me where this bomb is. And Batman revealed that the bomb was on him. He was the random individual that he placed the bomb on. And that gave Superman a respect for Batman that, carried on for the entire run of that iteration of the two characters. So to me, those are, yeah, exactly. They see and operate in completely different ways, yet have the same moral compass. That is a good way to put it. Let's see. Honduran says, RJ, when I said 27, I was referring to Detective Comics number 27, Batman's first appearance. Gotcha. Let's see. And let's see. Alan Moore, yes. Gordon, yes. I think the Swamp Thing version of Batman that I was talking about was Alan Moore. Could have been Bernie Wrightson that was doing some of the stories at the time, though. Let's see. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. Let's see if there's any more comments for me or if it's just going to jump. Let's see. Scrolling down. Honduran says Batman is great in the Batman and Scooby-Doo mystery series. I didn't know such a thing existed. Alessandro says, RJ, who do you think is the most underrated Batman villain? Again, I would probably go back to Clock King in my head. Oh, good heavens. I thought I was getting to the end of the chat and it just opened up an entire new, I don't know. It just jumped on me. Let's see. Scrolling down to see if we have any more Batman statements. Final Fantasy says Batman and Superman desire to help each other, but their reasons for helping others are very different. Yep. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Honduran says DC has actually made a lot of kid-friendly stuff. I don't know how popular they are, though. They do. And I think that they should get back to that, honestly. Rex says, RJ, from what I've heard, DC pushed this idea that Bruce Wayne was always fated to become Batman like Destiny, with the foreshadowing going all the way back to his distant ancestors. Again, that enters a mystical element into the character, which destroys the whole idea of him as a detective. And again, I can go on and about this detective thing, but you got to remember, the first place he existed and the main book for Batman is Detective Comics. So, it is something that is essential to the character, if you ask me. Scrolling down. Let's see. Tony says, RJ, who's your favorite Robin? Dick Grayson, obviously. To me, Dick Grayson is Robin, even though Dick Grayson is also Nightwing. Everyone else is a copy of Dick Grayson, a valiant copy, but a copy nonetheless. And that's why, again, when I made the character of Kit Fox, and I made a slew of basically wards for him, basically these people who were very much a version of the Robins, which I call the Jays, because I know that Robin is a play on Robin Hood instead of the actual bird Robin, but that's in my mind. When I was a kid, I always went back to, why would they call him Robin? But anyways, I always thought it was the bird, so I went back to Jays, and they're the Jays. They go with Kit Fox, and basically they're all competing with each other to try to be the next Kit Fox because it's a legacy. But yeah, I gave them very different approaches to the world and very different ways of looking at things. And part of that entire thing is that for my characters, they're competing with each other in a way that no one really competes with another version of Kit Fox trying to be the next Kit Fox by copying what they do. They each have their own niche, and they own their own niche is what they exploit to try to become the next version of Kit Fox when they grow older. To me, that's what the Robins really should do, and they don't. They're all just a copy of Dick Grayson, a copy of Dick Grayson, a copy of Dick Grayson, with little bits of differences here and there. Let's see. Scrolling down. Holy Moses, I am so far behind in this chat. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to have to skip through some of it. Yes, John, I am still talking. Scrolling down. Let's see if I can find any more. George says, I mean, Dick was adopted after his parents are killed. Jason was taken in after trying to steal the Batmobile tires, and Damian is his son. Tim is the only one who figured out Batman was Bruce Wayne. So yeah, they are different characters in who they are underneath the mask, but to me, that should express itself much more, because it does express itself in some ways in a different version of who they are as Robin. And then after they become something else other than Robin, like Nightwing or, the Red Hood or stuff like that, they do become something different. But I think it should be explored more when they are Robins themselves. Thank you very much, Gordon. He says Batman Year One is Batman issues number 404 401 to 407. I wish I had the time to go and look those up, but I'm trying to get through this chat right now. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see how far I am from the bottom here. John Henry, yep, Killer Croc I hadn't thought about. Killer Croc in Jerry Conway's run, his original creator was scary. Again, I would say it's an underrated villain. King Croc is an underrated villain in that version. I quite agree, John Henry. Yeah, in the original version. Let's see. I don't particularly like where they went with the character after that. Let's see. Zach 10 says, I liked Farmer Brown and his daughter as underrated villains. They and their animals were spooky. I think their weak motivation was a big problem for them. Okay. Let's see. Scrolling down. How you doing, Michael? If you're a big fan, probably of Sound Engraver, I'll say. I won't allow that to go to my head and think you're talking about me. I'll just say, how you doing, Michael? Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see if I can see any more Batman-related comments here. Let's see. Scrolling down. Whew, going through a lot here. Rex says, RJ, to be honest, how is this for an amalgamation fusion? Lex Luthor plus Norman Osborn and Joker plus Green Goblin. Honestly, I never thought of it before, but yeah, Lex Luthor and Norman Osborn are very similar, aren't they? But Joker plus Green Goblin, I don't know. To me, their visuals are very much akin to each other, but I don't think the motivation for those characters is the same, but it would make a very interesting amalgam fusion. I agree to that point. Let's see, scrolling down. Hey, Michael's here. How you doing, Michael? Everybody should go over to Bancroft's channel and subscribe. Go over to Bancroft's channel and subscribe. Michael Bancroft is the man when it comes to crowdfunding. If anybody wants to go and find out where you can find some good crowdfunded comics, go to Michael's channel and subscribe. And I want to thank you very much. Actually, Michael, if you're still here, pass along a thank you to Melanie for me, because she retweeted something that I tweeted today, and it got me a good handful of subscribers. Thank you very much to that. Scrolling down. Let's see. John says, oh, wait a minute. I didn't deal with Michael's question. Great men fighting gods is a trope as old as storytelling. Yes, and that's why Michael's characters are the way that they are. He has gods in there, just like I have gods in my stories as well. I focus on the Greek and some of the Norse. Michael focuses on the Babylonian, if I remember, Michael. Let's see. John says, I love Superman, and I'm okay with Batman. Well, John, that would explain why your character is very much the way that he is. But I think that the Patriarch is not a copy of of Superman, but it does show your love for the character. Let's see. Sound Engraver sits on the fence and says, I love both Superman and Batman equally. All right. Good to know. Scrolling down. Let's see. Exactly, John. This is what I was trying to say before. I like Batman as a detective more than anything else. I agreed completely. Michael says, I'm ambivalent to both. I'm ambivalent to both. Okay, let's see. Scrolling down. I thought you were saying you were ambivalent to John's long box, but no. Let's see. Scrolling down. Zach 10 says pretty much. Plus, Penguin takes over the mundane mobster and looked reasonable in comparison. I think he's talking about something in the chat to do with the show. Let's see. Scrolling down. Honduran says Superman is far superior than Batman. Elijah says he prefers Superman. There's a lot of people in here that prefer Superman, quite honestly. But again, I guess that would make sense since I'm the guy who talks about paragons of virtue. So I would attract people who would love Superman, I guess. Let's see, scrolling down. I think, quite honestly, that my as I said earlier, my love for Batman is a love for puzzles and the detective, which is why I'm going on about the whole detective thing. Elijah also says, RJ, are there any updates on my order? Oh, Elijah, I think, again, if you were the one who contacted me, I can't remember, Elijah. It's hard to keep track, everybody, but I did put your stuff in I tried to remail it. I put it in, or I had it put in the mail. But again, they're printed. The books are printed and shipped in Canada. And Canada, the day after I put it in the mail, the whole Canadian postal system went on strike. Quite honestly, I apologize profusely, but there's nothing I can do about that right now until they come back online. And I'm sure that they're probably going to have to resolve this before the Christmas rush, because people would just be up in arms if they didn't. So hopefully it's going to be resolved soon, and it'll just go to you. Usually takes about 12 days, I think, to get 12 to 16 days to get from Canada. So that's where it is right now, but it is in the mail. So that's all I can say about that right now. Let's see, scrolling down. And the thing is, again, I can't, the offices are closed, Elijah, by the way, so there's nothing I can do about it. I can't go in and get it. I can't check on it. I can't do anything. There's nothing I can do. Sound Graver, thank you very much for the $5 super chat. She says, first off, happy Thanksgiving. Second, how can I support and receive an upcoming black and white work fade to blue? I'm still working on where I'm going to release that. I wanted to release it possibly as a PDF, just myself, but someone did remind me that there is an online, I can't remember, I don't even, this is poor of me to not actually remember their name off the top of my head, which is a slight to them, to say the least. But there is a comic company out there, an online comic company, who had invited me to publish something with them a couple of years ago. They're in South America, if I do remember correctly, but they do publish a lot of stuff in English as well. I think, what a lot of North Americans and people who are writing comics publish with them. So I'm going to try to contact them again and see if I can get Fade to Blue published with them first, if they're still looking for me to publish something there. If you have, like, Chuck Dixon published the stuff with them as well. So, it's a fairly mainstream thing. But that's what I'm going to try to do. I want to contact them and get that out of the way, because if they want to do it, I could open up an entirely new customer base through their store. And if not, I will look for other alternatives and where to publish it, because we're almost done a book 2 right now. Again, I still have to, if I'm going to put the blue markings in it as the only color, I still have to get the colorist to do that and get the letterer to do the rest. But for book 1, the art is entirely done. Book 2, my artist is working on the last 6 pages right now. Let's see. So when I actually get it up somewhere, there's going to be multiple copies available, one after another. Let's see. Scrolling down. John says, I like a pulpy Batman rather than a sci-fi Batman. Completely agree, John. We just talked about earlier how Batman is a copy of the Shadow. The Shadow is very much a pulp villain, a pulp character. And I like him as a pulp character as well. Michael says, DC's nihilism and darkness always turned me off. You should go back to, as I was talking about earlier, Michael, should go back to earlier versions of DC, back to, like the 70s, and you'll see, at the very least, you go back to those versions, there's a ray of hope in a lot of DC at that time. Scrolling down. Let's see. I'll see if I can get to, again, Michael brings up an interesting point. Michael says, surely Alfred was like a father. Indeed. Surely Alfred was like a father. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. But again, I don't know how much of a father figure Alfred was in order to relay and convey what it is like to be a father. A mentor, maybe. I would see Alfred more as a mentor than a father, even though there are streaks of fatherhood in there. So, there's that. Vaz says, Superman pre-crisis, lots of silly stuff happening. Yep, indeed. So much so that Superman was not something I would ever read when I was a kid. There was so much silliness in it. Let's see. Scrolling down. Honduran says Red Hood still remains the sole fighter against the Friends of Crime. Okay. Let's see. I'm not entirely sure what that reference is. Let's see. Scrolling down. If there's a lot of crosstalk going on in the comments, which I love to see, but it takes me a little bit longer to get through the comments, so I apologize for any silence here. Greg has a good comment here. He says, a civilized person knows how to use violence, either inflict, deflect, or reflect, or dissipate. A good way to put it, George, or Greg, sorry, Greg. Yes, good way to put it. This is one of the things I think about when I go back to Augustine of Hippo. If anybody wants to read things like the City of God, right? He talks about the fact that, all emotions are good. It's just how you use them. And so he talks about how anger and fear are good as well. They're meant to be good, and they're meant to have a purpose. And those purpose is when you harness them in the correct way. And that's exactly the same kind of thing what you're talking about here, Greg, with violence. It has a purpose. It has a purpose, at the very least, in this world where our brokenness is on full display. Let's see. Sound Engraver says, exactly. Batman doesn't have to kill because he works with the police department. The real issue is that Gotham's corrupt judicial system needs reformation. All Batman needs to do is turn them in. Exactly. That's part of what I think is essential to the character is his ability to work with the police. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Oh, George has a good list here for Midnight Suns, which we're talking about. Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze, Spirits of Vengeance, Morbius, and Darkhold. Oh, I forgot about Darkhold. That is a completely forgettable character that just flew off the radar a couple of years after it was created. Let's see. Calliope says Magic is in the Midnight Suns video game. Yeah, I don't know why they included Magic. It's not a character that's supposed to be related to that. Anyways, scrolling down. Ducktan has a Batman comment. He says, I thought Batman would never put a bomb on someone, not even as a lie, but that twist was a good way to resolve it. I think so. Let's see. Tony says, the thing about Robin that nobody seems to get is that he was never meant to be Batman's sidekick. He was meant to be his inevitable replacement. Yep. Agreed. That's exactly what I was talking about when I was going over my characters. The Robins are supposed to be replacements. Let's see. Zach Dan says, in the Kit Fox story, the scene where the Jays and Cardinal rally the to Kit Fox is touching. Well, thank you very much, Zach Dan. That is part of, the whole point is for the Kit Fox story, which is my story, in case anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about. It's literally called the redemption of Kit Fox. So you have this character who has recently, before the events of Thomas Valley #1, has become the new Kit Fox, and he's not taking the mantle on very well, and he's becoming too cynical, too hard. And so again, we have to redeem, again, at the behest of Renzo Rodriguez, my beautiful artist. He has to redeem himself, and part of that redemption is him looking at his understudies and seeing that they are much more in tune with what is just than he is. And that's like one of the major steps within the redemption of the character. And I'm glad to see that it actually had some impact. Thank you very much for that feedback, Zach Dan. Let's see, scrolling down. Let's see. Honduran, RJ, I'm a big fan of you. Well, thank you very much, Honduran. Thank you. Rex says, RJ, the main character of my comic honestly mixes elements of Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, and Godzilla. Wow. I know I'm crazy. That's funny, Rex. Well, if you know you're crazy, then that just makes it even better. uh, Thank you for that laugh. Scrolling down. Let's see. Rex has to take off. He says, "Gotta go. It's getting late, and hoping to get some art done before I go to bed." Okay, I know it's getting late. I gotta go as well. Let's see. Scrolling down and see if I'm getting anywhere near the bottom. Oh, look, I am. Let's see. John Henry says, Nightwing's so conceptually compelling, being a superhero sidekick, leader of the Teen Titans, Justice League, Outsiders, adopted son, brother, boyfriend, acrobat, police officer, and his spiritual journey. I like Nightwing as a character, so much so that again, what I did for one of the characters, which is the Gray Jay, for my book, I basically took Nightwing and Daredevil and mashed them into one character. Although it's more Nightwing than Daredevil, but I wanted to have a combination of two because I have at the very least two characters that I usually mash together if I'm trying to do an homage to something. But yeah, I love Nightwing as a character. All right, well, I've hit the bottom of the chat, and we'll let Sound Engraver have the last word. Sound Engraver says good night, all. And I will say thank you so much, everyone. I've been talking for an hour and 40 minutes. I can't believe that. Oh, my heavens. I've been talking for an hour and 40 minutes, and you guys are still here. I got 32 people in the chat. I think we got up to 36 at one point. Thank you so much, everybody. And this was fun. I literally was stunned by how many great comments you guys have about talking about Batman. And I want to thank everyone who showed up tonight and is going to show up later. And you put some comments in the comment section of this video and tell me more about your favorite iteration of Batman and what you think makes Batman the essential parts of what makes Batman a hero and makes Batman who he is. So thank you very much once again for everybody who is here. And in order to lessen the load of just, stopping the stream as I usually do, I will give you an outro of the short Crom the Destroyer trailer. I just have to take Sound Engraver off of the screen for a second, and then I will do that. And I want to say thank you very much once again, everybody, for showing up. In case anybody doesn't know, the comics that I was talking about for my own books, the links for those are in the description. You can order Thomas Valiant or the Valiant Heroes, both at the Valiant Heroes Indiegogo site, or Crom the Destroyer, which is the trailer that I'm going to play right now, at its own Indiegogo site. Links for all those are in the description. And if anybody wants to follow me on Twitter, my handle for Twitter is there as well. I'll see you all later, and hopefully I'll see you on Sunday or Saturday, depending on when my video goes up, and next week here on Make Comics Great Again, where I will be talking to Mike Barron next week, because Mike contacted me and wants to talk about his new book that he's selling right now. So that's next week. All right, I'm done. Hour and 45 minutes. Thank you once again, everybody, and I will see you all later. Bye.
No matter how many wars you fight, no matter how much blood you shed, no matter how much rage you loose, no matter how many demons you face, no matter how many companions you lose, no matter if our kingdom falls, I know that you will return to me in honor.